So we've already dived into my championship predictions, and as the Premier League does get underway this week, I thought it would be a timely part of the year to go ahead and bring to you my Premier League predictions. I want to hear from you guys in the comments down below, probably most interested in who you think is going down this season in the Premier League. I think it's going to be really competitive down at the bottom of the championship. Going to be discussing all three of the newly promoted sides coming up to the Premier League and how I see them all faring. Also, if you want to get involved in the Premier League Fantasy Football League, I will leave the league code in the description down below. Also, if you sign up to Patreon, you can get involved in the Patreon exclusive league as well. Plenty to be getting on with, but without any further ado, let's jump in. Starting out at the bottom of the Premier League, I am going for Sheffield United. I feel like it's a bit of a popular consensus right now, but for good reason. It really feels like Paul Heckingbottom is having to work with at least one of his arms tied behind his back. In an ideal situation, Sheffield United would have been in a situation where a takeover went through the start of the summer and they could get building on a new project. That's not really happened, and so far Sheffield United's squad, compared to those who I think will be around them, I think is just looking really underbaked. Of the limited business that they have done so far, I do like a few of the pickups that they've got over the line. The addition of Austin Trusty, for example, thought he was really good while out on loan at Birmingham last season. I back him to have a good long-term impact perhaps at Sheffield United, but where are the goals going to come from right now in that side? I'm not totally sure. Obviously, the loss of Iliman Ndiaye I don't think can be underestimated. He was one of the best players in the Championship last season, and to lose him at this stage to Marseille is a devastating blow, and it now appears as if Sander Berge will be on his way to Burnley. So right now, just think the Blade squad is looking a little bit underbaked compared to those who will be around them. 19th place, is this a bold call anymore? Going for Wolves, just don't have good vibes coming out of that club right now. Had Lopetegui stuck around for this upcoming season, I think he'd have probably kept them up. I think there's still just about enough within that squad to work with, but the vibes behind the scenes at the moment are all completely wrong. It's expected that Gary O'Neill's going to come in, and while he did a great job in saving Bournemouth from relegation last season, there were large spells under O'Neill where I think Bournemouth really did flatter to deceive, and I just worry, especially with the lack of goals in that Wolves squad. He only scored 31 Premier League goals last season. They could easily be a side who's really sucked into it in this upcoming season, with the bottom of the table tipped to be as competitive as ever, really. So because of FFP, they're having to work with sort of one arm, it seems, tied behind their back. The loss of Neves I don't think can be underestimated for how big that's going to be for them. Generally, I think when you've got bad vibes behind the scenes, that can seep into the pitch and cause a little bit of panic, and I just think that maybe that could happen this season with Wolves. Last of the relegation spots, I am going to go with Luton Town. Really hope that Luton defy the odds this season, but compared to the other sides who I've got predicted to finish above the bottom three right now, I just think Luton might fall short. Certainly think they'll pull off some upsets throughout the season, but I think they've gone about their recruitment in quite a sensible manner so far, doing a similar sort of approach to when Burnley were originally promoted to the Premier League with Sean Dyche, and they were ultimately relegated back to the Championship. But what they did with their recruitment and scouting network was start to build the foundations of a really top-end Championship squad that will then grow eventually into a Premier League side. And I certainly see that with a lot of the recruitment they've done so far. The pickups such as Ryan Giles, Tahith Chong, Mads Andersen, Chidozie Ogbeni, these are players who will continue to grow and mould within this Luton project. Then you bring in someone like Marvelous Nakamba, who was obviously fantastic last season, so they will cause a few upsets throughout the season, but I think they'll just fall short in the end. Just surviving and getting over the line once again, I have gone for Everton. Tough to see much progression with this Everton squad right now. I just think that I've got enough credit in the bank with Sean Dyche to get enough out of this group to just about get them over the line. I certainly don't think that it'll be spectacular throughout the season, and there will be some massively frustrating moments, but from back to front, I think there's just about enough quality within that spine of that team, and ultimately it's a group of players who has been in this situation before. This isn't like a new situation they're walking into where they're just thrust into a relegation battle like it was previously, maybe when Lampard had this group. I think that overall they're a little bit more hardened to this now, and they'll just about scrape over the line, but I certainly could see them being there or thereabouts again. 16th place, I've gone for Nottingham Forest. I think this will be a season for stability at Forest after the mayhem of last summer, the massive overturn of players players and how long it took sort of Cooper to find a cohesive starting 11 where he could get a little bit more consistency out of them. I think that this season's approach will be a little bit more level-headed. The recruitment certainly has looked a lot more precise with the players they've been going after. And I think overall Forest fans would take a sort of competitive season where they have another season of stability and then look to kick on maybe in the next years to come. Still got hold of Brennan Johnson, which I think is massive. Gibbs White obviously had a massive impact there last season as well, and started to add a few more players into that group. Anthony Elanga, one who I'm a little bit up in the air about really in terms of his long-term prospects, but I think he will be given the chance to properly develop at Nottingham Forest and he won't be under that, you know, massive spotlight of Manchester United. Like the pickup of Matt Turner, I think he's a very sensible goalkeeper and solid shot stopper for the level as well. So sensible, steady recruitment so far, coupled with a squad which is already competitive and a manager that I rate highly in Cooper. I think Forest will be there or thereabouts again. 15th, I have gone for Fulham. Quite a significant faller from last season. Just been a bit of chaos over at Craven Cottage over the summer. Now, keeping hold of Marco Silva amid interest from the Saudi League is absolutely massive, and it also seems as if, as of recording, Mitrovic will also be sticking around despite kicking up a real fuss when he tried to push through that move to Saudi as well. If they have firing Mitrovic, who's fully committed back to the project again, I think Fulham will be fine this season. My only concern with them is a few areas of the squad which seem to be lacking depth at the moment. Still think there's quite a bit of business that Fulham need to do between now and the end of the window, and I can't ignore that run of form they had towards the back end of last season. From sort of March onwards, Fulham was just so leaky at the back. The Fulham's position very much depends on if there is another high-profile departure and the players they, you know, continue to bring in. But right now, I've got them around about 15th. In 14th, I've gone for West Ham again. Now, I did think that last season was a bit of an underachievement by West Ham in terms of their Premier League standing. Obviously, a great run in Europe, and that may be a little bit of a distraction for them again as they now head into the Europa League. Certainly thought that that squad, pound for pound, was better than 14th in the Premier League last season, but having lost Declan Rice this summer and as of yet struggled to get any deals over the line, I'm a bit conflicted on West Ham at the moment. Does the board still have the long-term backing with David Moyes in mind? As of recording, it's looking more than likely that they have struck a deal for Harry Maguire, which I actually think could turn out to be a solid signing for West Ham. The loss of Rice, coupled with Europe and still a little bit of uncertainty over Moyes, makes me think it may be another bottom half finish. 13th place, I've gone for Crystal Palace. Another solid mid-table finish for them. Roy Hodgson came in at the back end of last season and really steadied the ship there after they had been on a torrid run of form under Patrick Vieira. Tough to see them properly kicking on from last season based on their squad right now. Obviously, the loss of Zaha has been well documented. I still think that maybe their forward line is a little bit underbaked. They have been linked with several championship strikers throughout this transfer window so far. We've discussed plenty of them on the channel so far. And there's also interest in Eze, Elise, and if they were to lose one of those, that would obviously be a blow as well. Still think that the makeup of that squad is more than good enough to have them comfortably clear of any relegation troubles, and I think that Hodgson will guide them to a solid sort of mid-table finish. Coming in 12th place, I've gone for Burnley. I'm quite excited about their chances for next season under Vincent Kompany, and I think it'll be a year where we learn quite a lot about the Belgian boss, how adaptable his style actually is. There's no doubt he's going to have to make compromises in the Premier League this season with how dominant his Burnley side were in possession, chances being created in the Championship last season. Very interested to see which tactical tweaks he'll make to make them even better as a Premier League side. Probably the best example of that is Thomas Frank, how he went ahead and switched up the Brentford style of play from how they played in the Championship to Premier League to better suit them. But Burnley are without doubt one of the most dominant Championship champions that we've had in quite some time, and we've seen previously how champions of the Championship can just, you know, skyrocket to a top half finish in the Premier League. We saw Fulham doing it last season. Tim Wall's been excellent in the past. Burnley's recruitment model under this new ownership I think has been really clever, and while they are still missing a few stars here and there, you know, most notably, I'm sure that Burnley fans would love to get a deal for Nathan Tella over the line. Still think it's a really competitive squad for the Premier League, which they've added to and will continue to add to up until the end of the window, with their latest addition looking like Sander Berge from from Sheffield United. Overall, I think Burnley are best equipped to survive in the Premier League. Of the 3 that are coming up from the Championship this season, I think every Burnley fan would take a solid 12th place finish. 11th place, and a big improvement on last season, I've gone for Bournemouth. Now, am I maybe going a bit overboard with Bournemouth because I've read up a little bit on Iraola and I'm really excited to see him in the Premier League? Perhaps, but I do think there's a chance where the cards completely fall into place for Bournemouth this season, and it's a hugely exciting season. I think the recruitment's been really positive so far, albeit still a few gaps in that squad. Still think they're lacking a natural holding midfielder after the loss of Jefferson Lerma. His importance to that Bournemouth side over the last like 4 or 5 years I don't think can be underestimated, but the signs they've made in forward areas I think will improve them from that front. A new manager coming in with new ideas I think is really promising, and with Bournemouth having those ambitions to go higher up the league, you know, Gary O'Neill kept them up last season, did a great job in doing so, but Bournemouth seemingly aren't happy to just tread water, and I think that combination coupled with sensible recruitment makes Bournemouth a worthy candidate to push up the league this season. I think that last season everyone, myself included, was probably guilty of undervaluing how much Premier League quality was actually in that Bournemouth squad in the first place, because I mean people were talking about Bournemouth staying up like it was some absolute miracle when there was still a fair bit of Premier League quality weaving in through that squad, especially come the end of the last summer transfer window, and with more deals potentially down the line, I just get some good vibes from Bournemouth right now. 10th place, I've gone for Brentford. Slight drop off from last season, but overall still think they're capable of a top half finish, even with Ivan Toney missing the first half of the season through suspension. At the end of the day, this is a very tactically aware Brentford side who only lost 9 matches in the Premier League last season. That's the same amount of matches as Man United lost, and they ended up finishing 3rd. So even without the game-winning goals of Toney, and I'm sure there will probably be more draws along the way for Brentford this season, I think that Thomas Frank's tactically good enough to shift things around, and there's still enough quality to offset that loss, and ultimately they'll get him back for a booster in the second half of the season, where I'm sure their form will start to pick up. A few stars that I'm hopeful for have a bit more of an impact this season. I'm still holding out some hope that Keane Lewis-Potter will make a long-term impact at Brentford. Didn't have a great time last season, injuries didn't help him and somewhat derailed his Premier League journey last time, so I'm hoping that maybe he's got a bit more of a say in this season. I rate Thomas Frank and the whole project there to be stable enough to offset that loss of Toney initially. 9th place, I have gone for Brighton, but I would put a slight disclaimer with this one that I think every team from 9th up to about 6th, maybe 5th is really quite interchangeable. I don't think there's going to be many points separating this region of the table. Reason I've got Brighton in there is because they're going into the unknown of European football, and you know, how can we tell how that will go ahead and impact their squad over the course of a season, because I think Brighton actually have a really good chance of having a really good stab in Europe this season. Tactically, they were absolutely brilliant last season. Also, absolutely love the addition of João Pedro. I think he could be absolutely excellent in terms of a long-term buy for this Brighton side and adding more goals in the final third. The loss of McAllister is no doubt a big one. I still think that they're probably more than likely to lose Moises Caicedo by the end of the window. Whether he goes to, you know, Liverpool or Chelsea is anyone's guess. But a couple of big losses added with the burden of European football. Maybe there's a slight drop off, but I don't think there'll be a lot in it. 8th place, I've gone for Spurs, somewhere in the middle of the road with them right now. Very much in rebuild mode under Ange Postecoglou. Have made some decent signings so far, like the pickups of Mickey van der Ven and James Maddison. Still though, with the Harry Kane speculation running rife, it's tough to make a definitive judgment on them without knowing what their side's properly going to be looking like come the end of the transfer window. You know, is it going to be Harry Kane leading the line for the season, or is it going to be Richarlison? There's a massive difference in where Spurs go ahead and finish in either of those scenarios, really. I think with it being a bit of a rebuild year and how competitive it's going to be at the top, I could see Spurs missing out on that top 6-7, but being in and amongst it. 7th place, I've gone for Aston Villa. I think it's such an exciting project under Unai Emery right now, and I think one way or another he will find a way to get Aston Villa back in Europe consistently. Obviously, miraculously got them over the line last season after such a terrible start that Villa had under Steven Gerrard, and the form, the points they were averaging under Emery was absolutely spectacular. From November till the end of the season, the moment Emery took over, Aston Villa were 5th in the league table, which is a real testament to the groundwork he instantly put in place. And I think that coupled with some really sensible recruitment so far, the additions of Yuri Tielemans, Pau Torres and Moussa Diaby, I think Villa will be there or thereabouts in the top 6 hunt again. 6th place, bit of a regression from last season. I've gone for Newcastle. It's tough to tell, once again, similar to how we were talking about with Brighton. How is European football going to impact this Eddie Howe side? They were so good for the vast majority of last season, but they did have the luxury of almost solely focusing on the Premier League. They're not going to be afforded that this season, and while they have added to their squad, I think there is a potential where they drop a few more points in the Premier League because they do have half an eye on Europe at times. Excited to see the impact of Tonali in the Premier League. I think Harvey Barnes is a solid pickup, but still predicting a slight regression. 5th place, I've gone for Chelsea, just missing out on the top 4. Has to be an improvement on last season. Do think that with the strategy the club has gone for, you know, recruiting all these young players, I think Pochettino was probably the ideal choice of coach for this new look Chelsea that they're looking to be. Think that they do have a lot of promising youngsters coming through at the moment, and Chelsea do have that luxury this season of not having European football where they can solely focus on the league, and as a result of that, surely we got to see an upturn in their overall league form. To be honest, I was quite close between Chelsea and the team I had in 4th place, but I just think that maybe that inexperience come the end of the season could cost Chelsea. Coming in 4th place, I have gone for Liverpool. Think there's the potential for a lot of goals to be scored this season with that new look Liverpool front line, with, you know, Gakpo and Nunes having their feet under the table, Diaz back from injury as well, and Salah, who will probably still put up 25-30 goals this season. My concerns with them still come defensively. I think while they have added to their midfield with Szoboszlai and McAllister, their attacking options who will add more to the final third, but defensively I still think they could leave themselves really exposed for this season. If they get Lavia, I think that's a fine sign-in, but more in line with someone who's going to have more of an impact in the future. I don't think that Lavia coming in as a starting player week in, week out will be the difference for Liverpool as that sort of holding midfielder. Jurgen Klopp's more than capable of taking this Liverpool side on the run. I just worry about them defensively. And I must admit, from this point onwards, I have gone a little bit boring. I have gone for the same sort of makeup as how it finished last season. 3rd place, I've got Man United. I'm excited to see Onana. I think that he could give Man United a bit of a different dynamic and allow them to play a little bit higher up the pitch than De Gea did, with the likes of Mason Mount and Højlund also being solid additions with a look to the future, especially in the case of Højlund. 2nd place, and just missing out again, I have gone for Arsenal. I think they have made strides forward in this transfer window, particularly with the addition of Declan Rice. He is the signing that I'm most excited about for Arsenal this summer, but have they done quite enough to bridge that gap between themselves and Manchester City? I mean, they won the Community Shield final, but I'm still not so sure. And of course that means winning the whole thing. I have gone for Manchester City. The Premier League is becoming a little bit more predictable at the top of the table, I think it's fair to say. That's why I find the bottom of it a bit more interesting, because I think it's been more unpredictable over these last few years. But Man City, coming off the back of a treble, they have lost some big stars with potentially more still to leave as well. I just think that they're so far ahead of everyone else that even with those departures, I think they're still in a league of their own. There we have it though, guys. Those are my thoughts for the upcoming Premier League season. Would like to hear yours in the comments down below. Also, make sure to go ahead and sign up to the Fantasy Football League, which we will be running as well. Make sure to get involved in that. Other than that though, guys, thank you very much for watching again, and I'll see you all in the next one.